Understanding human behaviors, our values, and how this affects our decision making is something that has interested me for my entire adult life. I've studied different value systems based on different cultures, schools of thought, organizations, faiths, and national values such as British values and American values. Based on this, I believe it is possible to break down the decision-making process into three distinct levels: what we know to be true, or our knowledge, what we think, our thoughts, and what we say or act as our actions. If my wife comes home asking what I think of the dress she has just bought, then I may be compromised between what I know and what I think. It's about using our three faculties of head, heart, and hands. So to answer her question, I may have a conflict between what my head says and what my heart says. My hypothesis is that any conflicts between these levels can cause stress or anxiety. So being able to break down our decision-making process into these three levels gives us a way to explain the cause of everyday stresses in our lives, but also how to reverse them or unravel them. I believe that the approach and indeed the process that is involved could be extended to ethical decision-making in AI applications and in cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. So let's look at values, logic, and the structure that I have devised to bring about such a decision-making process into a model. So let's analyze knowledge, thought, and actions using EHV's human values model. I am Dr. Prabodh Mistry. I'm a director of Economic and Human Value Engineering Limited, a small company that is based in Abingdon, Oxfordshire. I'm also a consultant and an engineer. There are three parts to this presentation. The first part will go into introduction to values, value systems and core values, and then how we can actually use a mapping system to understand the deeper meaning of those values. So let's start with what we mean by values. Here I'm taking a quote direct from this author, Richard Barrett, has authored many books on values. And that says, "They are the energetic drivers of our aspirations and intentions. They are the source of all human motivations and decision-making." When we come to look at values and how we then compare different systems that there may be, we can actually look at all of the systems like this. Try to see what is common between them by looking at a Venn diagram like this. So as you can see, there is system 1, 2, and 3, and there is a high degree of overlap. And these systems could be from different cultures, schools of thought, organization, faiths, or national values, as I said, such as British values or American values. Basically, they are like the parts that make up an operating system or key drivers of an organization. But the one thing that I want to point out is that while there may be lots of overlap, there is a core overlap of two values of love and truth. They are the two values which are not related, but they work in pairs like yin and yang. I feel there is a direct connection of these values into the way we operate. Our human brain, its spatial trait on the left side is described as rational, analytical, logical, detailed, such as data, and has maths and science subjects related to that. The right side of our brain is more emotional, intuitive, imaginative, holistic, and subjects like art and music are related there. The value that is associated with the left side is actually truth. But what we will do is define what we mean by absolute truth in order to embed other values on the scale that we will choose for truth. Also, on the right side, we have the value of love that fits here. And we will define unconditional love, again, in order to embed lots of other values around these two values. When we look at a situation like this, there is refraction of light through the different media that this image is showing. The two glasses have different density liquids. So what is truth here? We know that the end of the straw should be on the right, but here it's actually showing on the left. So what is truth? We understand that a lot more than if we were to go into the cosmos, for instance. This picture is from NASA, and it's a galaxy that is 130 million light years away. So it has taken so many years in order for the image to actually be captured. So what may be happening now may be completely different. Let's look at the other end. So that's the more grosser end, this is the more finer end, atomic structure. Here too, do we understand what goes on in terms of what happens with the nucleus and the orbits of electrons? There's a great deal of void here, and we don't understand all of the forces that are interacting there as well. So let's go on to the definition of absolute truth. It is that which does not change or ceases to be. I said we needed a core definition of this value before we can go into the model. So that is one part. Also, as we have seen, it is difficult to comprehend what is truth because it depends on the point of observation, but is limited by what we can measure or observe with instruments. So I can say that absolute truth is limitless, unconditioned, and unapproachable. Let's put it on a grid in order to categorize what the different aspects of truth we are aware of. Here I have put from 0 upwards, passing truth, relative truth, and absolute truth is right up at the high end. Let's move on to love. What happens when two people meet? Is there a scientific basis for whatever that goes on? We call it love, but what is the form of attraction here? Is it chemical? Is it atomic? Or what? So let's come to definition of unconditional love. This is a quote from Shakespeare, which says, "Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds." So we can define love as that without any conditions, or it's categorical, and it's a form of true altruism. So we can say that as part of the definition that unconditional love is a form of universal force that seems to be wired into all living things. And this is needed in order to go into the details of the model itself. So let's categorize different love that we may come across. So here again, we start with conditional love here, and unconditional scale can actually extend far into towards the right. So as far as conditional love is concerned, we can put neighbor or colleagues there, or towards the right, family or friends, and towards the right, mother's love, something that I think we can understand. But I'm not saying that these are the hard and fast positions, because we may vary in how we interpret them. So what I do here is then use the classical XY grid to plot the two values that I have just defined. On the horizontal axis, I take the value of love. This is the origin, so that's almost the kind of 0 mark. And conditional love and unconditional love is that way. But at the other end, we have hate, the opposite of truth, or negative love. On the vertical axis, I have plotted the truth. So this is where the relative truth and things that we understand fits, but absolute truth is right up there that we don't really want to go into. What's important here is to point out the different qualities of the 4 quadrants that are here. In quadrant 1, we have love and truth, both positive. And that's a quadrant that is what I would call the ideal quadrant. Quadrant 2 is where truth is positive, but love is negative. So it's not as good. But look at quadrant 3. That's where there is no love, or there is hate, and there is no truth. In fact, there is untruth. So this is the worst quadrant to be in. This quadrant is actually similar to quadrant 2, but the difference is there is truth there without love, and there is love here without truth. What I will also do is that I will draw a circle here in order to say that we can only work within the confines of something like this. We cannot go outwards because that's an undefinable area as far as human behavior is concerned. We can also describe love with other values such as compassion, affection, and so on. And we can also have values of truth as accuracy, integrity, and so on. But let's use this grid in order to plot and understand what we mean by other related values. So we could use, first of all, the value of justice. Now here, the meaning of justice will be different depending on who we speak to. For instance, this could be a law court judge, for instance, who may consider justice to be comprising of love and truth. But if we were to ask a victim, for instance, to that person, justice is going to be quite different. They will want a degree of vengeance, but with some honesty. So we can actually vary in what we mean by justice, for instance. Let's look at other values like sympathy. Sympathy we define as understanding and comforting distress of another person. So we may put that somewhere here. And something which is closely associated with it is actually empathy, which we may define as understanding and trying to feel somebody else's distress. So we're trying to understand what they feel. So empathy may be placed here. Other values like pride. Well, there may be some truth in it, but it's certainly love that a person is expressing. We can also have another value, such as flattery. That is defined as excessive praise based on little or no truth. And that we can actually place somewhere here. Again, I emphasize this is just my interpretation of where they may go. Cynicism, pretense, clearly untruth, and probably doesn't touch the love axis at all. Vengeance, something full of hate. So this is one way in which we can look at values. So this may be a good time for an exercise. You can, as a group, decide on a selection of values and see where you would want to place them on this grid. So it's over to you. So let's come to the second part of my presentation. What I'm going to cover are values at 3 different levels now, the 3 levels being knowledge, thought, and action. Then I will actually show you the values model, and then also show you how we can apply that in everyday dilemmas. So as a reminder, values at 3 levels. action or speech level, hands, thought, instinct or mind at heart level, and knowledge or intellect at head level. We have number of positive values. In fact, this is just a short list of positive values that may act at action level. And we can actually place them in the quadrant 1, such as dependability, modesty, helpfulness, and so on. And I've actually put this as a pinnacle value because what I have defined right conduct as is when the action is full of love and truth, then that's a right action or right conduct. So that's the positive set of values. And at the other extreme, remember quadrant 3, that's where we place the negative values, such as misconduct, hindrance, unreliable, and so on. At thought level, we have values of peace, calm, content, and so on. And there are lots of other positive values as well. Here's a short list. And this is how I will place them on the love versus truth axis. So this is the positive quadrant with positive values. And at the pinnacle, I've placed peace. So when there is love and truth at thought level, then that is the ideal value of peace. But there are also other positive values such as calm, understanding, contentment, and so on. And at the other extreme, we have the negative values such as tension, non-understanding, agitated, and so on. Coming to knowledge level, again, we have a large number of values, but we will select only some of these to put into our love versus truth schematic. So, at the pinnacle, when there is love and truth, I have placed the value called non-violation. Again, there are positive values such as consideration, care for the environment, morality, and benevolence. And at the other extreme, we have violation or exploitation of the environment, disregard, wickedness, malevolence, and so on. So, this is what I have done by taking those 3 levels, the values that I have described at action, thought, and knowledge level, and put them together into a model like this. This is a physical construct of the model that I will use to illustrate some examples. Also, I want to point out that when there is alignment as shown by the straws, yellow straws at the bottom and purple straws at the top, that this alignment is where the outer ethics lie. And between thought and knowledge, there's what's called the inner ethics that links thought and knowledge. So here is the model. I showed you how the 4 quadrants of the model works. So here there is quadrant 1 with love and truth as the 2 axes going outwards, and this is quadrant 2, this is quadrant 3, and this is quadrant 4. As you can see, I have marked with these clips the quadrant with both truth and love all along in this quadrant, same at the knowledge level, as thought level, as the action level. This is quadrant 2 with just the truth but no love. This is quadrant 4 with love but no truth marked. And of course, this is quadrant 3, which is the worst of the 4. So let me show you how this model works using the example that I alluded to. But first of all, let me first put a marker down. I want to mark a reference point here, and I will put this symbol here, the wise owl, to mark the reference point as being good. We all drive cars, and for one reason or another, we end up driving at speed higher than the legal speed limit. This is going beyond rules and regulations. So this situation, when we are driving, would be considered as love of driving at the expense of truth. Now, we may be driving fast and slow, so coming in and out of this possible tension quite easily. This what I call the outer tension, when there is misalignment of action with thought. But what happens when we are caught by the police? At that stage, we are made to reconcile our thought with action. And what happens is that the tension that was here, the outer tension, is now transferred to inner tension. That has now gone from action and thought to between thought and knowledge. So this is the tension that we need to be very careful with, because if it's there for any extended period of time, that can cause stress and anxiety. So you have seen a practical demonstration of how the model works. So let's just summarize what we saw. Use of the physical model. When we take small risks, there is conflict between action and thought, and that is related to outer tension or any conflicts felt here. When police catches me or anyone speeding, then there is tension between thought and knowledge, and that causes inner tension. You saw in the model how the tension created there, when you got caught, that the tension was actually transferred to this upper level or inner level when you had to reconcile your actions with thought. So a summary of the example, that the stress, the inner stress that was considered earlier, would mount up until something is done about it. And what can be done about it to reverse such a stress? Well, the model helps again. And in this case, two ways to unravel or release tension is to care less about your reputation. Well, that may not be advisable in the long run, but that is one option. But the foremost is not to drive above legal speed limit. The model can also be applied to other situations, such as youth carrying knives, software piracy, paying or avoiding taxes, impact of social media on the youth, etc. Part 3, what I will do is I will allude to some of the applications, advanced applications that this model can be applied to, such as in artificial intelligence, in mental health, but also allude to some of the further developments that this model needs to be taken through. I'm looking for partnership, and I will also acknowledge the support I have had so far. So to summarize, the EHV model, what I have presented so far is basically a high set of ideas around human values. It's based on rationalizing the way we look at our inner ethics or values with outer ethics by considering those at knowledge, thought, and action. The model is actually consistent with our general understanding, and it shows that true humanness lies in having one's words and actions aligned with thoughts and knowledge. Right actions are the precursors to true happiness and well-being. Basically, it prevents mental illness. We can also summarize it in this form as input and output. The input are basically two key values of love and truth. And the highest values that I showed, the pinnacle values as I pointed out earlier, were right action at action level, peace at thought level, and nonviolence at knowledge level. And this part we can actually regard as basically the body of the function. And we can actually represent it in an equation like this. Output being a function of the input. And we can actually now compare what happens in human beings versus what happens in AI systems, for instance. So the input and outputs will be fairly straightforward, because here the input would be data and knowledge. But this is where it'll differ. The thought, intuition, or mind in human case would be programmed as an interface engine. Can we design AI programs that will be equivalent to thought based on core values of truth and love? I believe that this proposed model would find wider application, as it would be agnostic to any faiths or cultures, Eastern or Western. So this is what we need to focus on. Impact of social media on the youth is not currently measured or imaginable, as they are new. And what we know is that the impacts are increasing. Mental health is becoming a big issue of our time. We see those in youth and we see in other people. So let's look at mental health as an example. I've chosen anorexia nervosa because it could be thought of as a mental disorder. What happens here? The fact is that the person may be feeling fat when he or she isn't. The diagnosis may be showing malnutrition and/or medical complications. But the action of that person of not eating or missing meals and exercising despite being tired is completely opposite to what they should be based on this knowledge level. At thought level, what may be going on is that there is a distorted image of one's body. Mind may be affected by bullying, social media, society pressure, and personal nature. Let's remind ourselves of where we are with respect to the model. We looked at these three levels and how they impact on us. I've shown you the model and how it works, looking at outer tension as a conflict between action and thought, and inner tension as conflict between thought and knowledge. We can also measure deviations from the ideal using metrics that I will go into. Here, what I have done is that given that this is the ideal, that I've given that the score of 1, quadrant 2 as 3/4, quadrant 3 as half, and quadrant 4 as 3/4 again, because these are the two equivalent. This one has truth but no love, this has love but no truth. So we can actually begin to score each of the three levels like this, where we would look at ideal score. If all of the levels are aligned, then it will be 1 times 1 times 1, the score of 1. But if everything was aligned to this quadrant, where it would be half times half times half, then the score would be very low. Manageable stress, in my example, could be regarded as 0.75 based on this scoring. Or the stress to avoid could be somewhat lower in score. But the method I prefer is to actually express the deviations in terms of ratios of K to T to A, knowledge to thought to actions, in this manner, because it actually tells you where the deviations may be. And so when unraveling or looking at solutions to correct situations, then that may be very helpful. So where are we as far as the model is concerned? We are very much at the qualitative stage, and the current model has a structure based on quadrants. Metrics are based on degree of turns, and it's based at 3 levels of knowledge, truth, knowledge, thought, and actions. But we need to move into this particular set of aspects. Structure needs to use numbered grid that I will come on to. And so metrics can be based more on position vectors rather than quadrants. So it'll be much more accurate in terms of description using mathematics. And again, it'll be at the 3 levels as before. So this is what the current situation is. And we can move to this level where we begin to put scales on the degree of love or categories of love and categories of truth as 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, or 1 to 10, whatever the scale we may choose to apply. So plotting and understanding related values using such a grid could be done in the same way as before. We can actually put the values of justice not only with a position, but with a position vector or coordinates. So I have marked 3, 3, 3 as love, 3 as truth on this particular map. Again, as I said, we can actually increase the scale as we like. So the other justice is scored at -2 and 1. Sympathy and empathy, you can see the difference in the scores slightly. More on the truth side, it goes from 1 to 2, but the love aspect stays the same. Pretense, vengeance. So you can see where we are with the model. It needs further developments to take it from qualitative to quantitative and towards specific applications such as AI, CBT, or other. So if you are interested in helping to develop the model further, please get in touch with me. To end, I'd like to acknowledge these 3 people. I am grateful to these 3 individuals for their scrutiny of my model, but also the encouragements they have given me to come out and talk about the model itself.